West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël.
Anyone looking for proof that irony is truly dead need only look to Capitol Hill and Senator Chuck Grassley, ranking Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Here he is today confronting Attorney General Merrick Garland.
Since your confirmation, in less than a year, the department has moved as far left as it can go. You've politicized the department in ways it shouldn't be. Case in point, your infamous school board memo.
So more on that memo in just a second, but spoiler alert, as you'll see, it's anything but infamous. First, though, the whole irony being dead thing, because the Chuck Grassley you heard talking is the same Chuck Grassley who shilled for each and every attorney general and acting attorney general the former president used as his personal political enforcer or fired when they would not go as far as he publicly said he wanted them to go. It's the same Chuck Grassley, by the way, who's running for re-election at age 88 and who recently re-embraced the former president shortly after the man put out a statement saying the 2020 election was the real insurrection. And there he is shaking his hand. The same Chuck Grassley who dished up this word salad when CNN's Gary Tuchman tracked him down and asked him about it.
This is your chance to answer that question. Do you think the real insurrection, what he said, was in November?
I don't think your question's even appropriate from this standpoint. I was given a chance to speak 5 minutes at this event, and I took advantage of that to say about what the Biden administration is doing on inflation, nothing. What they're doing at the border, nothing. How they left Americans in Afghan, nothing. And the tax and spending spree that we have. And I had a chance to say about the last 4 years, how I've worked to get strict constructionists on the Supreme Court, how I've worked to get tax cuts, and how we've worked in conjunction with ethanol, with a president that's very appropriately has said how he and I have worked together to benefit Iowans. He said I loved Iowans. So I had an opportunity to be before 23,000 Iowans, and I wouldn't have had that opportunity if he hadn't brought that crowd together.
So, sir, was the real insurrection in November, or was the insurrection on January 6th?
I'll take you back to my...
It's your chance to answer the question.
Yeah, I'm answering it.
Yeah, he wasn't answering it. He didn't answer it because he's afraid of losing the support of the former president if he crosses or contradicts him. Grassley referred to a statement he made previously after the insurrection, which, if you look it up, was negative toward the president, but he's not willing to actually say that now, to speak those same words, because he's afraid. Even if it means debasing himself. An 88-year-old man who served this country honorably for decades as a senator is now bowing down and debasing himself to the former president just to stay in office. Today, Senator Grassley and some other Republicans on the panel, including Josh Hawley, the guy who raised his fist in solidarity with the gathering mob on January 6th, spent their time with the current Attorney General, Merrick Garland, misrepresenting the facts surrounding the memo. You just heard Senator Grassley mention a minute ago what he called the school board memo. Now, before we go any further, here's what the memo actually said. This is a memo from the Attorney General dated October 4th to the FBI Director, U.S. Attorneys, and the head of the Department of Justice's Criminal Division. Quoting from the subject line, quote, partnership among federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement to address threats against school administrators, board members, teachers, and staff. It goes on to direct the FBI to convene meetings with those officials to discuss strategies for handling the rise in criminal conduct against school personnel, which, if you've been watching the news lately or involved in your community, you know is a real thing. Now, what has the senators upset is that the memo came several days after the National School Boards Association, not the FBI, the National School Boards Association, wrote a letter to the president in which it likened some of the threats and actual violence to, quote, their words, a form of domestic terrorism and hate crimes. Now, that association has since apologized for its choice of words, which drew a very negative response, understandably. And this is key. Nothing in the memo by the Attorney General Garland, not one single line, refers to parents as potential domestic terrorists. In fact, there's no mention of parents or terrorism at all in this menu, none. So with that, listen to Tennessee Republican Marsha Blackburn, how she characterized what Garland wrote.
I just have to ask you, knowing that you really helped to bring to justice those that caused the Oklahoma City bombing, would you really honestly put parents in the same category as a Terry Nichols or a Timothy McVeigh?
My God, absolutely not.
Then why would you ever release a memo? I mean, did you write that memo? Did staff write that memo? What would have led you to do this? It is so over the top.
He didn't do that. And it isn't. But when Garland said correctly that there's nothing in the memo like that, Senator Blackburn replied, and I quote, that may be your opinion. Actually, it's not. It's actually just what was in the memo. Democrat or Republican, fan of the administration or not, facts are facts and words are words, and there's not a single word, phrase, comparison, or insinuation on this page that parents are domestic terrorists. There's just not. The only insinuations were coming from Senator Blackburn or, of course, Senator Cruz got in on it.
This is a memo to the Federal Bureau of Investigations saying, go investigate parents as domestic terrorists.
Then there was Senator John Kennedy.
You don't think there are parents out there in the real world that said, oh my God, maybe we shouldn't go to the school board meeting, there'll be FBI agents there?
And Senator Josh, I raised my fist for insurrectionist, Hawley.
It's wrong. It is unprecedented, to my knowledge, in the history of this country, and I call on you to resign.
Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas also called on the Attorney General to resign.
This is
That's wrong.
shameful. Judge, this is shameful. This testimony, your directive, your performance is shameful.
That's not correct.
Thank God you are not on the Supreme Court. You should resign in disgrace, Judge.
We should note that 3 of those you just heard from are said to be considering a run for president. Based on their performance today, maybe auditioning would be the better word. Joining us now, CNN Chief Legal Analyst Jeffrey Toobin. Jeff, are the comments from Senator Grassley saying Attorney General Garland has politicized the DOJ accurate?
Well, no, they are not accurate. And as you pointed out, they are rich with irony, since he spent 4 years defending the incredibly politicized Justice Department of William Barr and Jeff Sessions. But as you point out, this was theater where Merrick Garland was really a prop more than a witness, so that some Republican senators could campaign for president, some Republican senators like Grassley could run for re-election, but it all had very little to do with Merrick Garland.
What does it say that Grassley is suggesting the Justice Department is politicized when the former president, whom Grassley is clinging to for re-election, tried 9 times to get his Justice Department to undermine the election, according to this committee's report?
Well, this is sort of the fantasy world in which we live. But, Anderson, it's really important to remember why we are talking about school boards at all. Because it's about white supremacy. And that's on the rise in the Republican Party. The reason school boards are controversial is that some school boards have dared to teach that, civil rights and African American rights have not been so great in this country over the centuries, like when we had slavery and when we had Jim Crow. And that has so outraged the Republican Party telling the truth about race in America that they feel the way to win elections and to win the governorship in Virginia is to demonize these school boards for daring to tell the truth about race in America. And that's really the core of what's going on here. And that's even more chilling in a way than the posturing that went on today in the Senate.
Some who watched today thought Attorney General Garland should have maybe pushed back harder. Are you surprised he didn't, or is that just not in his nature?
That you have to remember that Merrick Garland had spent the last 20 plus years on the DC circuit where the judges treat each other with respect, where they deal, even when disagreeing with each other, in the realm of what you might call reality and facts. And he's not used to the give and take in the surreal world of our contemporary politics. I think he handled it in a low-key way, but he was really irrelevant to what the Republicans were trying to do, which was to lie in advance of a white supremacist agenda.
It is Thursday, the 28th of October of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, it is Thursday, getting on to a Halloween weekend. Looks like there may be plenty of rain, in fact, more than plenty of rain coming in, starting tomorrow, as a matter of fact. I was supposed to get some concrete work done to prevent the walkways and concrete areas from being so slippery in the winter, especially now that my mom is not so spry, shall we say. But they won't be able to do any work on it when it's raining. So for the first time, I've been not wanting rain, and here it comes. Anyway, I was thinking it'd be nice to have some rain to keep the kids from trick-or-treating, because I don't know if I'm going to take part this year. I feel a bit hesitant about even leaving candy at the end of the walkway and the gate for the kids to, help themselves. They're not greedy. People don't just walk away with the bowl, too. Last year we did that, but I stood at the door. We kept our distance and stuff, and people were respectful of that. But it was a warm night. It was warmer and not inclement, so we'll see. I might change my mind and decide to set up something so even if it is raining, it's protected. But we'll see. I'm thinking maybe we'll just turn off the lights and leave it at that. Little TV flicker on the inside. Those people are really home. Yeah, well, that's your trick, buddy, instead of the treat. Could have gotten a lump of coal. Could have. So, how are you? We're getting into that weekend, and then next week. Oh, I heard something. I heard some breaking news. Oh, what? Hopefully we got all of the Democrats on board, and I think that what that means is that we have 50 of our guys and gals on board for the spending bill. They call it the spending bill. Some people don't like the idea of spending. I don't know. It cracks me up. The people who don't like the idea of a spending bill go out and buy Trump yachts so they can swamp them in some lake and sink. If you got money to burn, I guess it doesn't matter that you can swamp your boat and the boats around you and sink. And then you got to pay to get it back up on the surface or to shore. They got to get it out. They can't just let it sit there because there's toxic chemicals in those vessels. Jeez. But if you got money to burn, I guess it's okay. It doesn't matter. And look at the size of their monster trucks too. These are not people who are hurting financially. Well, let's put it this way. I don't think they have their priorities straight. If they're hurting financially and they have a monster truck, maybe they should be spending their money in some other fashion. Maybe they need, well, a daddy to tell them what to do. They don't want a daddy, but they want a daddy. They don't want Mr. Rogers as a daddy. They want Walker, Texas Ranger. And I got to tell you, Walker, Texas Ranger guy, not that big. Yeah. He's able to fight, at least on camera, pretty good. Looks like it'd be powerful. But, I don't know. My experience is that you get one of those little guys trying to kick you. Sometimes they just bounce off of you. Why is that? Pillsbury Doughboy type stuff used to bug me. Poppin' fresh. What am I talking about? We don't know. And yet we still do, don't we? Well, I'll give you a little bit of an update on my mom's progress. We did go to see her primary yesterday, and he just could not keep talking about how great it is that my mom's alive. 10 people died. There was 4 women in the ICU when my mom was there, so 5 women. My mom was the oldest at 84. The youngest, my sister said was in her 40s, but I remember a 32, 34-year-old in the midst of that. And there was a 40-year-old, and then the other 2 were like upper 50s, low 60s, somewhere around there. My mom's 84. My mom is vaccinated. My mom has some comorbidities, okay? And these other 4 women were not vaccinated. They all died. And then another 6 people died in the midst of it when my mom went to the care home in Medford in the Asante Hospital. So essentially there was 10 people who died almost in one day. Sure, the Three Rivers Hospital is the largest hospital in the area, but Grants Pass isn't that big. And for one hospital to have 10 deaths in almost a 24-hour period, a little bit more, is an astounding number. And yet, there's still people in that ER arguing with staff that this is all fake. They don't need to wear a mask. And they're telling other patients in the waiting area. This is the other thing that bugs me. If someone is suspected of having COVID, or if they're suspected of being anti-vaccination, they need to be separated, like quarantined from the rest of the people in the waiting room. We think that that's where we got it. Because, my mom's this gregarious sort, and I'm trying to tell her, Mom, let's not get so close to these people. Because we had people right on top of my mom telling her, I'm not wearing a mask. I don't need to. And my mom's already immune compromised. People and she should be wearing masks anyway, before all of this happened. But back to our primary, my mom's primary. He's amazed that she's alive. And she's on the mend. Her kidneys, he couldn't stop talking about her kidneys. They've improved dramatically, and that's a good sign. She has a few little things that we need to get some antibiotics for and continue. Some issues. Like I said, she has some comorbidities. The heart attack, fortunately, was not debilitating. It's the kind that can sort of repair itself. I heard the term a stress heart attack, but that's still a defib. And usually defibs do cause damage, but she had a surprisingly strong heart to begin with, in spite of these comorbidities that she had. But he did mention that if not for the vaccination, because he was following, what was going on. I mean, she had some bad numbers there for a bit. And it did not look good. And then she rallied because she's a fighter. She's a survivor. And even though she says, I don't want a DNR anymore. I want a DNR. And we're like, Mom, wait a second. You say that now. So I don't know. Maybe when I get there, I'll say I don't, I want a DNR. Maybe. We'll see. But she's a survivor. She's a fighter. And we're glad to have her back. And it was a wonderful visit with her doctor. And to note the progress that she's making and the progress yet to be made, of course. But it doesn't seem insurmountable. And that's all part of the healing process. And that's, well, as you know, a good thing. Okay. So, once again, thank you out there for all the well wishes. My mom appreciates it. I haven't shown her every one of them, but she's amazed that there was an outpouring of support for her well-being. And that did her well as well. All right. Well, I suppose what I should do is give you a rundown on what we have in store for you here in this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, at the top, GOP senators not only erupted at Garland, and we know who they were. I like to call them the Nazi insurgents, but, that's me, because I'm a romantic. But they completely misrepresented the facts, but that's what they do. That's what Nazis do. Speaking of Nazis, what's up with this book burning BS in Texas? Some Texas Politico got a list of 860 books that might have race, sexuality. Well, what? You're going to ban the Bible now too? Give me a effing break, you Nazi. Yeah, they burned Beatles albums. They have no trouble burning books. In fact, they've been wanting to do it. They haven't had a bonfire of book burning in quite a while, and they can't stand it. They need it. All right. Well, on the rest of the menu, a child care crisis is hampering the economy. Yeah, something we don't talk about too much. Let's get rid of child care stuff from the spending bill. Okay? Okay. Rhode Island students have brought a suit to a federal appeals court to affirm that all public school students have a constitutional right to a civics education. Now, my audience here, we all were required to take civics back in the day. I remember you couldn't get out of 8th grade until you passed the Constitution test. Now, by the time my son went through grade school into junior high and high school, they didn't teach civics at all. He had to learn his civics, on the job, so to speak, growing up. Because we were civically involved, walking precincts, that kind of thing, Being an election person, sitting at the table, giving ballots out. Any number of things. It was your civic duty to do those things, and you did it. And apparently, the reason that we have this January 6th insurrection, which these Rhode Island students point out, is because of a complete ignorance of America, its ideals, and what it means to be a civically involved citizen. Good for them. And at least 59,000 meatpacking workers caught COVID-19 and 269 workers died last year, which is significantly more than previously thought. Oh, you mean previously passed off as PR? Yes, more like it. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where France will bar British fishing boats from some French ports starting next week if no deal is reached with the UK in a dispute over fishing licenses. Well, that was rather wordy. And a hike in the cost of wheat is alarming French households who fear a possible rise in the price of the prized baguette. Give us this day our daily bread. At a fair price, too, by the way. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, is the chat room link right by the social media scroll. And Kelly Lincoln monitors that chat room, and we thank Kelly for doing so. She's quite busy in real life endeavors, so thank you for putting the effort you put in here too. Thanks. If you out there in radio listening land or podcast listening land would then look across to the left from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the left of that is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, that helps us pay our bills, get the needed software and hardware required. Yes, it is, to be able to continue this powerhouse of resistance against a hostile takeover of the United States of America. No need to be jocular about it, because the time for joking is over. But your help in us paying our bills and all the other needed things that are required to keep us going is a very helpful behavior on your part. Thank you. Where am I going? What am I saying? Anyway, we can't do it all by ourselves. We try, but we need some help. And thank you for your generosity. We've been doing this for 10 years. And we do take it quite seriously, and we thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended, and they did. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and he's got a lot of stuff in real life as well. Thanks, Tom. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's easy. Just go to @Justice Putnam, of course. And I'll just tell you that I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. So you can check out the show notes and links there directly. But then I post it up on social media platforms like Twitter and that other one. Have they changed their name yet? I don't know. What are they going to call it? I don't care. Anyway, the show notes and links are a very important part because of this salon here, West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but that's where the real reportage is without all the accoutrements that we've accrued. Okay. Follow the show on Twitter at CookbookWest. And I mentioned podcasts. Pick up those podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. And wherever podcasts can be found, they're everywhere. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Associated Press by Sally Ho and Josh Boak. After Brian King's son was born in July, the occupational therapist and his wife, a teacher, started looking for childcare in the Los Angeles area. The couple called 8 daycare centers. Some did not have spots for months. Others stopped taking their calls, and some never answered at all. So with no viable options, King scrambled to find a new job that would allow him to work remotely. I told my manager, hey, by the end of the month I have to transition out, King said. They were very supportive and very understanding because they're all mothers, but now there's one less body to see patients. King said he's fortunate he found a job teaching online classes, but the unexpected career pivot forced him to take an 11% pay cut. The truth is, even if he could find a daycare spot for his now 3-month-old son, the $2,500 monthly cost of infant care is so high that taking a lower-paying job so he can work from home and care for the baby is the most financially sensible thing to do. The child care business has for years operated in a broken, paradoxical market. Low wages for workers and high costs for consumers, yet the critical service somehow managed to limp along. Now, the pandemic has made clear what many experts have long warned. The absence of reliable and affordable child care limits which jobs people can accept, makes it harder to climb the corporate ladder, and ultimately restricts the ability of the broader economy to grow. Early learning is no longer seen as just a women's issue or a children's issue. It's really seen as an economic issue, because in America, that's the only one that counts. In this reporter's opinion, it's about workforce participation, said Mario Cardona, policy chief for Child Care Aware of America. It's about employers who don't have to worry about whether they'll be able to rely upon employees. Child Care Aware estimates 9% of licensed child care programs have permanently closed since the pandemic began. Based on its tally of nearly 16,000 shuttered centers and in-home daycares in 37 states between December of 2019 and March of 2021. Now, each teacher resignation, coronavirus exposure, and daycare closure reveals an industry on the brink with wide-reaching implications for an entire economy's workforce. The national crisis has forced many people, mostly women, to leave their jobs. Reshaping the child care crisis is not just a problem for parents of young children, but also anyone who depends on them. It has contributed to a labor shortage, which in turn has hurt businesses and made it more difficult for customers to access goods and services. You know, those supply chain problems. The decisions we make about the availability of childcare today will shape the U.S. macroeconomy for decades to come by influencing who returns to work, what types of jobs parents take, and the career path they are able to follow, said Betsy Stevenson, an economist at the University of Michigan. President Joe Biden has pledged an unprecedented burst of federal spending in hopes of fixing the child care market. At a recent town hall in Baltimore, he assured parents they would not have to pay more than 7% of your income for child care. Federal money would go directly to care centers to cover costs in excess of the 7% cap. This means the median U.S. family earning $86,372 would pay $6,046 annually for child care. Biden's plan also includes universal pre-K, which would further reduce child care expenses for family. The expanded monthly payments for the child tax credit approved in Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief package would be extended for another year. And he also proposed increasing the size of a tax credit for the cost of child care, all of which should help improve access for families. Of course, I don't know if those have been dumped from the final bill. We'll find out. The CBO has yet to score the costs as the measures are still negotiated ahead of Biden's G20 conference in Rome. And it remains to be seen what survives in the brutal negotiations in Congress for Biden's broad family services agenda. But the pandemic is proving to be a make-or-break catalyst for the future of the child care industry. Jennifer McDermott of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. Students in Rhode Island are asking a federal appeals court to affirm that all public school students have a constitutional right to a civics education, saying that they are not taught how to meaningfully participate in a democratic and civil society, and that the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol was a symptom of such ignorance. Students nationwide need to know how to participate in the political process, effectively exercise their constitutional rights, and learn skills like media literacy to distinguish accurate from false information, their lawyers argue. The plaintiffs have asked the first U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals based in Boston to reverse a lower court's dismissal of the case, declare there is a constitutional right to an adequate civics education, and send the case back to district court. Such a judicial declaration is urgently needed, their brief to the court argues, in light of the events of January 6th that were carried out by a mob motivated by a fundamental misunderstanding of the congressional role in counting electoral votes, end quote. Oral arguments will be heard Monday. Musa Mohammed Sesseh was a high school senior when he became a plaintiff in 2018. He said that he hadn't been exposed to even the basics of how to participate in democratic institutions. He said he wasn't taught how local government works or how decision makers are affected by the citizens they govern. Moira Hinderer joined the lawsuit on behalf of her 10-year-old daughter, June. She has taken June to watch city council meetings in Providence, and they visited the State House to see people give testimony. When they went together to the federal court for this case, June asked, "What's a judge? What's a court?" I just feel like a lot of that is on me as a parent to try to explain these concepts to the best of my ability and show her how things work, said Hinderer of Providence. Participating in democracy requires tools, she said. And if we are raising young people to become citizens in a democracy, that requires some thoughtfulness about how they are educated. The defendants include Rhode Island's governor, education commissioner, and other education authorities. Their lawyer, Anthony Catone, told the appellate court in a brief that binding legal precedent has established there's no fundamental right to education under the U.S. Constitution. The appeal should be denied and dismissed, and Rhode Island's sovereign right to determine what is taught in its schools preserved, in accordance with Supreme Court precedent, the brief states. U.S. District Judge William Smith in Providence dismissed the lawsuit a year ago, ruling that while it was clearly desirable and even essential for citizens to understand their civic responsibilities, it's not something the Constitution contemplates or mandates. But he warned of a democracy in peril and commended the students for bringing the case. Hey, let me give you a little pat on the head, kid. Which he said highlights a deep flaw in our national education priorities and policies. Hopefully, others who have the power to address this need will respond appropriately. The plaintiff's lead counsel, Michael Rebell, said Tuesday he always tells people it's the best decision he has ever lost because Smith helped make the way for why civic education is so important. Rebell said the January 6th Capitol insurrection further shows why the right to an education adequate for capable citizenship is necessary for the survival of American democracy. Those who took part in the January 6th insurrection, and even those who have been shown up there and supported a position but were not violent, I don't think they had any understanding of how the Electoral College works, what the role of Congress is vis-a-vis the president, he said. Anybody who graduates from high school should have had that kind of essential information. That's one of the big gaps we have in our current political understanding on the massive scale in this country. The student's complaint, filed in November of 2018, also says minority and low-income students, and students learning English are disproportionately affected by the disparities in opportunities for civic participation. The appeal, however, focuses on constitutional issues rather than that claim. The defendants argue that the plaintiffs conflated the importance of education as a historic national value with its status as the source of a fundamental constitutional right, and that the state has established a framework and guidance to help ensure civics education is an important part of curricula. Then why isn't it there? Furthermore, the plaintiff's specific factual allegations should be better made to a local school board than a court. Of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. At least 59,000 meatpacking workers caught COVID-19, and 269 workers died when the virus tore through the industry last year, which is significantly more than previously thought, according to a new U.S. House report released yesterday, Wednesday. The meatpacking industry was one of the early epicenters of the coronavirus pandemic, with workers standing shoulder to shoulder along production lines. The U.S. House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Crisis, which examined internal documents from 5 of the biggest meatpacking companies, said companies could have done more to protect their workers. The new estimate of infections in the industry is nearly 3 times higher than the 22,400 that the United Food and Commercial Workers Union has said were infected or exposed, and the true number could be even higher because the company's data did not generally include coronavirus cases confirmed by outside testing or self-reported by employees. At the height of the outbreaks in the spring of 2020, U.S. meatpacking production fell to about 60% of normal, as several major plants were forced to temporarily close for deep cleaning and safety upgrades, or operated at slower speeds because of worker shortages. The report said companies were slow to take protective steps, such as distributing protective equipment and installing barriers between workstations. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Exactly 1,000 years ago, in the year 1021, a Viking or 2 or 3 likely wandered around the very northern tip of Newfoundland, cutting down trees.
Clearing a particular spot, or for gathering wood that might have been used as timber for construction of some type, or for perhaps for boat repair. They were very careful to obviously make sure their ships were seaworthy.
Michael D. is a geoscientist at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. He says it's not news that Vikings made it to North America around this time. Scientists and scholars have surmised as much from archaeological remains in Newfoundland and by scrutinizing ancient texts, like the Icelandic sagas.
One is not really sure how literal one can take the Icelandic sagas. They contain a lot of not only inaccuracies, a lot of things that are obviously fantastical, things like dead people speaking to them and so on.
But now Dee and his colleagues have been able to come up with a precise date, the year 1021, based on evidence these Norse visitors left behind, specifically a stump, a log, and a branch. Wood anatomists have determined that certain surfaces of that wood must have been cut by metal blades. That's a Viking technology the local indigenous people are not known to have shared. And Dee's team was able to use a cosmic occurrence, an extraordinary shower of high-energy particles from space around the year 993 to date the felling of the trees. You see, that shower of cosmic rays created an abundance of radiocarbon. When taken up by the trees, it left a lasting signature in the tree ranks, giving the scientists a key to pinpoint the year 993 in the 3 wood samples, using radiocarbon dating.
And then you see all you have to do is count the rings from there to the edge. You have to know where the edge is, the bark edge, and then you'll know that was the last growth year of the tree, or the felling date of the tree. And it just so happened that in all 3 cases, that was exactly the same year, 1021 AD.
The details are in the journal Nature. The year 1021 therefore marks the first time we know of that Europeans set foot in the Americas. But as the authors write, it also marks, quote, the earliest known year by which human migration had encircled the planet.
Ever since moving out of Africa through Europe and Asia and across the Americas, nobody had got across the Atlantic Ocean. So by this date, we know that the Atlantic Ocean was crossed for the first time.
But, as we know, it wouldn't be the last. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
It was 1963, and Only in America, recorded by Jay and the Americans, was a big hit.
I'm singer-songwriter Patty Larkin, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
The group's lead singer, Jay Black, had what the New York Times described as a velvet voice and an extraordinary vocal range. Jay and the Americans was a group comprised of 4 white men, with their race and gender reflected in their music. Only in America, with its lyrics about a working-class boy who found love with a classy girl, reflected in America where for white men, particularly in the fantasy world of rock and roll, all things felt possible. However, Songfacts reports that Only in America, as first written and recorded by the Drifters, had a chorus that protested racism. Atlantic Records balked at those lyrics, the Drifters refused to release the song with new patriotic lyrics, and it ended up being recorded and released by Jay and the Americans. Only in America's message of opportunity and freedom and equality wasn't remotely true for many when it was recorded, and it still isn't remotely true today. But Jay and the Americans were a force in pop music, and their hits, some with problematic lyrics, remain a staple of every oldies playlist because their music was amazing. Jay Black died in October. He was 82.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1861. That was the day that the Pony Express made its last run and passed into legend. The mail delivery service had lasted only a year and a half, until it folded under competition from the newly completed Transcontinental Telegraph. The idea for a faster Western mail delivery service came from the owners of the wagon freight company, Russell, Majors, and Waddell. At the time, the railroad terminated in St. Joseph, Missouri. The goal of the Pony Express route was to cover the 2,000-mile route from St. Joe to San Francisco in 10 days, or half the time of competitors. Riders would travel between one station and another on horseback, switching horses as they went. For this arduous job, the company targeted young men, sometimes in their teens. The goal was to hire small men to keep the weight low for the horses. The riders had to sign a pledge not to drink, gamble, fight, or swear. To back up the clean living, they were each issued a Bible. Riders were paid a minimum of $50 per month in addition to room and board. The riders faced many hazards from bad weather to thieves. They often traveled across lands in dispute between the U.S. government and Native Americans, adding to the potential danger. The fastest express delivery ever was Lincoln's inaugural address, which made it to California in under 8 days. Perhaps the most famous person who claimed to be a Pony Express rider was Buffalo Bill Cody, although it's unlikely he ever carried the mail. He incorporated the Pony Express into his Wild West show, turning the mail service into the stuff of legend. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 55 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of about 72 degrees Fahrenheit. A bit warmer than yesterday. Sun and clouds mix throughout the day, winds light and variable. Mostly cloudy tonight with lows about 51. Winds will remain light and variable. And then tomorrow, showers in the morning, then cloudy in the afternoon, with highs in the low 60s, winds light and variable, bringing with it almost a quarter inch of rain. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon continue to rise. We now stand at 232,097 confirmed cases of infection, and our deceased have increased by 4 and now stands at 314. Ragweed pollen is rated low right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is good at 24 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.27 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles, and relative humidity is at 95%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 65 and sunny. Rome is 70 degrees and sunny. Kyiv is 56 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 52 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 74 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 70 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees and fair. And New York is 54 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press staff bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. France announced yesterday, Wednesday, that it will bar British fishing boats from some French ports starting next week if no deal is reached with the UK in a dispute over fishing licenses, and suggested it may restrict energy supplies to the Channel Islands as well. Since the UK left the economic orbit of the EU at the start of the year, relations between London and Paris have become increasingly frayed. France vehemently protested the decision last month by the UK and the Channel Island of Jersey to refuse dozens of French fishing boats a license to operate in their territorial waters. France considers the restrictions as contrary to the post-Brexit agreement that the British government signed when it left the EU. Dozens of other French fishing boats did not get such a license. Jersey, which is only 14 miles off the French coast, is a British Crown dependency outside of the UK. As such, it has its own powers with regards to who is allowed to fish in its territorial waters. It has granted licenses based on its interpretation of the UK-EU trade deal and has accused France of acting disproportionately.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Thomas Adamson of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A hike in the cost of wheat is alarming French households who fear a possible rise in the price of the prized baguette, seen by many as a barometer of the country's economic health. Many boulangeries around France are putting up signs warning customers that the long, crunchy staple could be going up in price by 4 to 6 cents from its average of about just over $1. Although that might not seem like a lot, it's a huge increase. The baguette is precious. It has only gone up, 10 cents in the last 20 years, said Dominique Anrac, president of the French Confederation of Bakeries and Pastry Shops. The bread industry crunch has been linked to a 30% worldwide increase since September in the price of wheat, one of the baguette's key ingredients after bad harvests in Russia. Rising energy prices that are making ovens more expensive to operate are also a factor. Anrac and other experts say with businesses and consumers worldwide already feeling the heat of higher prices from supply chain and labor constraints. Energy prices are affecting the Italian food chain too, with expectations they will push up the cost of drying grains. That could eventually raise the price of bread and pasta at supermarkets, but meat and dairy aisles are even more vulnerable as beef and dairy farmers are forced to pay more for grain to feed their animals and pass the cost along to customers.
Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.